The Bible, to me, the whole thing is God's love story to us. It's unconditional. We can't win it. We can't lose it. He is pursuing us in unconditional love. And he then equips us to have those kinds of relationships. So where I'm not a perfect wife, clearly, or a perfect friend or a perfect daughter, I mean, God has given me what I needed in those moments to step up and work through difficult things. And, Shell and I say all the time, I don't know how people get through life and tragedy and marriage and all these struggles if they don't have something bigger to rely on, something comforting of God's presence and his promises.
Shannon Bream, welcome to the Rosenberg Report, and congratulations on your wonderful new book, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak, Biblical Lessons on Romance, Friendship, and Faith. It's a great topic. It's a beautiful cover, and I just want to congratulate you. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you so much, my friend. I've taken a lot of encouragement and inspiration from you as an author over the years, so it's great to be with you.
Well, it's great. I'm so glad to have this interview. And Lynn and I love to read books together, to actually read to each other. We don't do it for every book. There's not time, but we do choose a book, a couple per year. And we've chosen yours to read next. Now, we've already started it, so we're well into it. But I just want to tell you how much we are loving it and to thank you, because this is interesting to me. And I want to ask you, how did you get into writing this trilogy of books about the Bible, and why did you choose this time to focus on the Scripture's greatest love stories, and both romance but also friendship? Because I love that combination. Lynn and I both do, and it's just catching us afresh. We can't even think of a book like this.
Well, first of all, hello to Lynn as well. And I'm so honored that you guys would invest your time in reading this together. And I hope that other couples will do that too.
Yeah.
The first book a few years ago, Fox came to me and said, we're thinking about getting into this space. We know your faith is the most important thing in your life. Would you be interested in authoring a book for us, especially focused to women? So we did that first book, Women of the Bible Speak. And I knew these stories from growing up in the church and going to religious school, but I was just blown away and kind of felt like I met these women afresh and anew, and really studying their stories as an adult and really digging into them a bit more. It was written and came out during COVID. I do think people's hearts were kind of more tender and more open. Many people told me, I'm re-looking to connect with my faith or to look at this for the first time. I think there was a lot of anxiety and loss and fear. Yeah. So it filled this place of encouragement, which I loved. That was such a blessing to me. So because of the success of that, we decided to keep going. So we did Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak, and got to look at, some different relationships. And then we came along to this, and I thought, there are so many men who are important in these stories too. And some of the most beautiful stories in the Bible are these love stories. I think about Ruth and Boaz and Mary and Joseph and Song of Solomon and some of the trickier ones in the Bible too. And so we thought, let's shine a light on that. The world tells us a lot about romance and relationships and what we should pursue. But we see some really beautiful examples in the Bible. So why not focus on those? And you said friendships too. I think they're the fabric and the glue of our lives, and that God provides us these relationships and he creates us in a way that we desire them and we need them in our lives.
Yeah, I think friendships are under a tremendous pressure. COVID, of course, meant that we couldn't even spend physical time with each other, but also technology. We are moving faster than we always did. We can have sort of short, quick contact without actually having deep, heartfelt conversations. So I think this is important. But okay, you mentioned Song of Solomon. Let's go there. Chapter 1, you dive into the steamiest, most passionate, most candid, sexually explicit, racy book of the Bible. The Song of Solomon, also known as the Song of Songs. So let's go there. You don't hide. You lead with it. It's the leadoff hitter.
Yeah.
But people ask all the time, Shannon, why in the world would God put that in the Bible? And so you're the expert. What's the answer?
Oh, I don't have the expert, but I have referred and learned from a lot of experts on this. And I think you're right. Why is it in the Bible is a good question. I think everything is there for a reason. And so we have this very passionate back and forth between these two lovers who are desperately wanting to be together and joined in marriage. And to me, it's a reminder, listen, God created us. He knows our emotions, our passions, our desires. And this idea of talking about romance and sex and love and marriage, That's all through the Bible. None of this is a surprise to God. He's not like, oh, what are they doing down there? I mean, he created all of us. And so I think it's a good thing to dig into and to look at how these two go back and forth. And, there are these admonitions like, don't awake this love or the passion until it's time. And they're talking very much about wanting to be together in this bond of marriage, meeting each other's families and all these important things. So there are a lot of experts who have disagreements about exactly what the book is all about, but it's there for a reason. And yeah, I had somebody the other day say to me like, oh, I was told we couldn't study that until I graduated high school. And it's not something you talked about a lot in Sunday school, but I think as adults, we can have these conversations and dig into it.
Our youth group, our senior high youth group in my little town of Fairport, New York, 5,000 people, very small, but this was the topic one weekend.
Whoa, that's great.
A getaway, Yeah, it was supposed to be about relationships, but also about sexual purity. But boy, did we giggle and a little snarky at times because some of the descriptions are either embarrassing or they're just so ancient that they don't resonate, in the modern era. But we also, we go to a congregation here in Jerusalem, and recently one of the young leaders in the congregation started teaching through a series on Song of Solomon. I thought, oh, okay, so I haven't heard one in a while, right? Because many churches don't teach it.
Right.
But he's taking it almost completely, not entirely, but he's teaching it really as an allegory between Christ and the nation of Israel. Now, I think there are certainly lessons, right? All scripture is profitable, and there are lessons, and there are some analogies. But boy, some of the descriptions of the intimacy and the sexual content, I'm like, brother, and we've had some very fun, robust conversations with each other, friendly, but wow, I'm not seeing the allegory as the primary. I think this is a man who's in love and a woman who's in love, and I don't think you need to add so much more to that because there's no other book in the Bible that talks as honestly and candidly and passionately about love and romance. And so maybe it's a book we shouldn't be avoiding.
Right. I think you're right. And I think that there are a lot of theologians out there who do differ on whether this is an allegory of God's love story to Israel or Christ to the church. But as I was working on and writing this specific chapter, I visited a church with friends, and I was excited to see that when I walked in, the pastor was tackling Song of Solomon that day. I was like, okay, bravo. It was a younger church that's like 20 and 30 somethings. And I thought this could be a little bit awkward, but he did such a good job with it and talking about how these two had not only a physical attraction to each other, but there was a real recognition of character. They had respect for each other. They were trying to do things the right way. And it's all about that desire and longing. And that isn't a bad or negative thing. God created us that way. And so I think it's a beautiful picture to look at. But yes, theologians do have different theories about exactly how we should interpret it.
I have to ask you, you're the Sunday morning, Fox Sunday morning, putting all the politicians on the hot seat. I'm going to put you a little bit on the hot seat because the one thing you don't discuss in that chapter on Song of Solomon is that Solomon had a sex scandal in his political career, or at least I don't know how scandalous other people saw it, but he did have 700 wives according to the Bible and 300 concubines. So if you had him on your set, I think you'd be asking, why should we listen to anything you have to say about a godly approach to love and sex and friendship and a godly, good, healthy marriage? So what is your answer to why should we listen to Solomon?
I think it's a great question. And I think about David and the fact that he also was described as a man after God's own heart, but also had all of these wives and these concubines. And to me, the message is, listen, because we talk about Adam and Eve in the book, and I write about God's perfect plan for them being partners and equals in marriage and get this assignment to, have his kingdom on earth and all the things they were to do and to care for each other. When you think about in the New Testament, the assignments that we're told men are to love their wives the same way that Christ loved the church, like that's very sacrificial. That's one person that you're supposed to be serving, and how women are to deeply respect their husbands. And so I think these two men, David and Solomon, who did a lot of wonderful things for the Lord and had a lot of descriptors about their hearts and how good they were at carrying out his policies, at times both got off track. And, a lot of scholars out there will say these men were totally away from God's plan ultimately later in their lives about how they dealt with marriage. It was not God's perfect and ideal plan. But like everybody else in the Bible, they were flawed, and God could still use the good parts of their story, which I think is encouraging for us. But I don't think that either one of them were models about what God really intended for marriage, although this relationship may have been something different and special.
My sense of it is that this is Solomon's first love, his first marriage. We know of a political marriage in the Bible that he marries a daughter of a leader in Egypt to sort of build an alliance. But my instinct, when I look at the totality of why God would put this story in there, it can't be his 434th
Right. There's no way.
marriage, like, right? Because he's talking about there's no one else like you. There's nobody. But she would be like, you got to be kidding me. There's hundreds more like me. Like,
right.
So I think this is his first, and that's why it was pure, and that's why God says, in its moment, this was great. This is the model. And then Ecclesiastes, at the end of his life, he really confesses to the world how badly he blew it, including in this issue of women.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that's a very strong theory. And it makes sense when you think about how they're longing to be with each other. And it sounds like there is no one else for these two.
Right. Lynn and I are loving this book. I told you that. And I've named it our top book recommendation for April for our All Israel News Book Club, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak. And I love that you've dedicated it to Sheldon. You refer maybe more in this book, I think, than you have in the other two books about the Bible. You're a little bit more personal because you keep connecting it to your own story. So I want to ask you, how did you two meet, and how has the Bible helped you during obviously good times, but you referenced some of the ones, and there's been others, really serious traumas and very, very painful periods in your life. How has God spoken into your own friendship and romance together?
Yeah, we were both students at Liberty University. I was there studying and getting a degree, and Sheldon will say he was there having a good time and playing baseball. But that put him through college. And we had a friend in common who kept trying to put us together. And it wasn't until our last semester we went on a date. And I already knew that I was going to law school at that point. I was going to go home to Florida to go to law school. So I thought, I'm never going to see this guy again, but he's pretty cute. And, if he wants to take me to dinner, then we'll see how this thing goes. And I was blown away on that first date. He was not at all what I thought he was going to be. Some of the athletes had, reputations of just kind of being players, not just on the field, but off the field too. And this was a guy that made me dinner, took me to a Christian concert, clearly was very close to his family and serious about his faith. And I was like, this is like husband material. Now what do I do? We dated. I know, what am I going to do with this guy? He's so much better than I even thought he would be. So we dated all through law school. My dad used to jokingly say, my late father, you're going to law school or med school. I don't want to hear about any guys. I don't want to hear about anything till you get done with one of those. But he did let us get married my last semester in law school. He signed off on that. That's and, good. We have been through so many ups and downs. I mentioned his struggle with a brain tumor was very difficult. I've had physical challenges and found out, after a long time of trying to get a diagnosis years ago, that I've got a genetic condition I've got to manage. There's no cure for it, but he has been a steady rock for me through that. And together we have seen the body of Christ come around us. People we didn't even know sending us notes and saying, we're praying for you, just because we share a faith and they wanted to walk on this journey with us. But in the darkest, toughest times, whether it's been our own individual physical struggles or, bad patches in marriage, because everybody's going to have those, we were bound together by these vows that we took and by, Christians and family members around us to call us out and say, like, you guys got to work this out. I mean, this is a pledge that you've made, and God has been the faithful glue for us in our darkest moments. When we've gotten away from him as human beings, he's never moved. I mean, he's always there waiting for us. And something I emphasize in the book is, like, the Bible, to me, the whole thing is God's love story to us. Yeah. It's unconditional. We can't win it. We can't lose it. He is pursuing us in unconditional love. And he then equips us to have those kinds of relationships. So where I'm not a perfect wife, clearly, or a perfect friend or a perfect daughter, I mean, God has given me what I needed in those moments to step up and work through difficult things. And, Shell and I say all the time, I don't know how people get through life and tragedy and marriage and all these struggles if they don't have something bigger to rely on, something comforting of God's presence and his promises.
Yeah. One of my deepest fears, probably my deepest fear, and one of the reasons I made Marcus Riker a widower, is losing Lynn. Like I
Mhm. It is
I
the
don't
worst.
want to be somebody who, loses her, but that happens to people. And then how do you pick that up and how do you move on?
Like you talk about widowhood. And so Ruth and Boaz is one of those stories that I love in the Bible and included in this book because I think a lot of people feel like, and rightfully so, that your life has just stopped when you lose a spouse. And it's got to be the most incredibly devastating thing in your life. And Ruth was in a terrible place because she decides, instead of going and starting a new family, which she had every right to do, she decides that she wants to stay with her mother-in-law, who's also widowed. So she's entering this life of poverty
Right.
willingly.
Right.
But she goes to work in the fields behind the workers to just glean and do what she can to provide for them. And it happens to be Boaz's field. And they're one of the best love stories, I think, in the Bible
Yeah.
because he
True.
sees her and has great respect for her sacrificial love and what she's doing. He sees great honor in her. And of course, they end up in the lineage of Jesus Christ. So I was
Right.
happy to include that story, especially.
I'm so glad that you did, and I think that it will be very encouraging for many people. Look, we need to wrap up, but I have to ask you: do you have other books in you, Shannon? What's next for you? And are you really going to try to write a book during the next presidential campaign season, or are you going to take a little time off? I'm just curious. I got to ask.
I think there'll probably be a little break in there, but there's something that I'm working on. I am no Joel Rosenberg, but I have a story that came to me that I feel like the Lord dumped it in my lap. It was very quickly came together. It's a fiction piece. And so I'm trying to figure out if I can do that and learn those skills and tell that story well, because I think there's always a good market for interesting, heartrending, beautiful stories of fiction that are done well by Christian authors. So I'm taking notes from you, Joel.
Shannon, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the books. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And it's just been a great encouragement to see not only Fox encourage you on the book writing path, but to promote you to being the anchor of Fox News Sunday. And the ratings are great. I think people feel like you're fair, that you really want to know what they think, and you're willing to challenge them. But that's something that not every news anchor is perceived as genuinely wanting to understand that person's perspective. And I think you do that very, very well.
Thank you very much. It's been a huge blessing. Thank you. I take it as a responsibility for our viewers as well. So I hope they feel like people get a fair shake. And we always say to folks when they come on, please come back. And we want to hear all the perspectives out there.